The room is dim, almost deliberately so. A rehearsal studio in New York, late evening, the kind with scuffed wooden floors and a single microphone standing alone at center. Michael Jackson is seated near the back, baseball cap pulled low, hands folded, trying not to be seen. Then the first note hits, not loud, not flashy, just clean. Whitney Houston's voice fills the room, carried by nothing but breath and pitch. Michael's head lifts, his eyes lock on the microphone as if it had just revealed a secret. According to accounts from people present, he leans forward slightly and doesn't blink. This is the instant he knew something was different. Not fame, not potential, but inevitability. Weeks earlier, the rules of the industry had already been written in ink. The early 1980s music business was obsessed with control, image, crossover appeal, radio formats sliced cleanly by race and genre. Michael Jackson, fresh off the cultural earthquake of Thriller, understood those rules better than anyone alive. He had fought for videos on MTV. He had negotiated creative control down to the frame. Whitney Houston, by contrast, was still being introduced to rooms like this one, showcase rooms, rehearsal rooms, rooms where executives sat with arms crossed and pencils ready. Her weapon wasn't leverage, it was a voice trained in church, sharpened in Newark, and disciplined enough to sound effortless. The turning point object that night was the microphone itself. No band, no effects, just a stand, a cable, and Whitney's grip steady at chest height. People there would later say Michael watched her mouth shape the vowels, watched her posture between phrases. This wasn't casual listening, it was study. The stakes were invisible to most of the room, but enormous. If Whitney really was what her supporters claimed, she wouldn't just be another great singer. She would shift the center of gravity for pop, for black women on mainstream radio, for what crossover even meant. Days earlier, whispers about Whitney had been following Michael through industry corridors. A producer at a Los Angeles studio had mentioned her name while adjusting a mixing board. "There's a girl," he said, "she doesn't miss." Michael reportedly asked one question: "Does she feel it or just hit it?" The producer paused before answering. That pause lingered. Michael had spent his life hearing perfect voices that meant nothing. Feeling was the line. At the time, Whitney was navigating her own pressure cooker. Meetings at Arista Records, photo tests, conversations about how much gospel was too much. According to insiders, executives debated whether her voice was almost a problem, too big, too commanding, too hard to package neatly. The microphone became a test device. Could she scale it down without losing truth? Every rehearsal was a quiet referendum. The night Michael Jackson entered that rehearsal space, he didn't denounce himself. Accounts say he stood near the wall, partially obscured by a speaker cabinet. Only a few people recognized him immediately. Someone whispered his name, someone else stiffened. Whitney, already at the microphone, didn't stop. She launched into another run, this time softer, controlled, riding the note instead of attacking it. Michael's foot began to tap, rhythm before judgment. The room's power dynamics shifted without anyone calling it out. Engineers leaned closer to the glass. A label rep lowered his notepad. Whitney closed her eyes on a sustained note. The microphone angled slightly upward now, and the sound stayed centered. That was the tell, control without force. Michael tilted his head, a gesture people who knew him recognized instantly. Interest had turned into attention. In that moment, Michael wasn't listening as a peer or a fan. He was listening as someone who knew what it cost to carry an era on your voice. He had been a child under studio lights, a teenager negotiating contracts, an adult fighting for autonomy. He knew the price of being undeniable. Whitney's voice, filling that rehearsal room, suggested she might pay it too. When the song ended, there was no immediate applause, just a beat of silence, thick and evaluative. Whitney lowered the microphone slightly, waiting. Michael didn't clap. He stood. According to those present, he took a step forward, then stopped, as if deciding whether to reveal himself. The decision hung there, unresolved, like a held breath. What happened next, what Michael said, what he did, and how that moment detonated, would reshape how both of them moved through the industry from that point on.
The next morning, the story was already moving without either of them touching it. Word traveled fast in the early 1980s industry, especially when Michael Jackson's name was attached to a room. By noon, people at Arista were whispering that Michael had heard the girl. The anchor detail everyone repeated was the same: a rehearsal studio in New York, a single microphone, no band. Nothing else mattered. Whitney Houston arrived that afternoon for another run-through. Same room, same scuffed floor, same mic stand waiting at center like a witness. At rehearsal, the hierarchy showed itself in small ways. An engineer adjusted the microphone height twice instead of once. A label executive asked if she wanted water before singing. Whitney nodded, calm, hands folded, eyes focused on the mic grill. According to accounts, she asked what Michael thought. No one answered directly. Someone said, "He stayed the whole song." In that business, that was already a verdict. That night, Michael Jackson was back in Los Angeles, but the sound followed him. Insiders later claimed he replayed the moment in his head the way he replayed mixes, isolating phrases, studying tone. In a studio off Sunset Boulevard, Michael reportedly mentioned Whitney's name while listening to playback. He stopped the tape, pointed at the speaker, and said, "She sings like she's already free." The room went quiet. Everyone there understood what that meant. Freedom in that industry was rare, expensive, and dangerous. The escalation came step by step. 2 days later, Whitney was asked to sing the same song again, same microphone, this time with a small, invited audience, A&R reps, radio consultants, one television producer. The mic cable snaked across the floor like a line you didn't cross casually. Whitney stepped up and delivered it again, note for note, but with a subtle change in phrasing. People noticed. Someone whispered, "She's not trying to impress anymore." That was the shift. Meanwhile, Michael's opinion began to move through intermediaries. According to industry lore, he told a trusted executive, "Don't overproduce her." That sentence traveled faster than any demo. It reached Whitney's team by the end of the week. Suddenly, creative meetings changed tone. Fewer arguments about pop polish, more talk about letting the voice lead. The microphone had won. Dialogue revealed the pressure clearly. At one meeting, an executive reportedly said, "If Michael hears something, radio hears it next." Another replied, "Then don't bury her." Whitney sat at the table, hands in her lap, listening to people debate her future as if it were a weather system. The anchor remained the same. That first moment, Michael heard her sing, unguarded, into a bare mic. A few nights later, Michael attended another private listening session in New York. Different room, same microphone model. This time, Whitney sang a gospel-rooted ballad, reportedly, "He Can Use Me," her voice lifting off the floor and filling the ceiling corners. Michael stood near the back again. Halfway through, he closed his eyes. That detail circulated later like scripture. Eyes closed meant surrender. After the song, Michael spoke, just one sentence according to multiple accounts. "Don't let anyone rush you." He said it softly, not as advice, but as warning. The stakes crystallized in that moment. Rushing Whitney could mean flattening what made her dangerous in the best way. It could mean turning inevitability into just another release cycle. The system reacted quickly. Photo shoots were postponed. A planned up-tempo single was reconsidered. The microphone became sacred. Engineers were instructed not to compress her vocals too aggressively. Each decision traced back to the same origin point: Michael Jackson hearing Whitney Houston sing and recognizing a force he couldn't ignore. Whitney felt it too. According to people close to her, she sang differently after that week. Not louder, not softer, but with more ownership. When she stepped to the microphone, she stood still, trusting it to carry her. That confidence didn't come from praise alone. It came from being recognized by someone who knew the cost of recognition. By the end of that week, anticipation had replaced curiosity. Executives waited, producers held their breath. Michael had heard her. The industry was bracing for what that meant. And then came the moment when hearing turned into certainty, when Michael's private realization became an undeniable public shift, detonating the truth of what Whitney Houston was about to become.
The detonation came in a studio that wasn't supposed to be historic. Midday, fluorescent lights, a control room cluttered with coffee sheets and lyric sheets. Whitney Houston stood behind the same microphone model Michael Jackson had watched her use before, the grill catching a faint reflection of her face. Michael was seated behind the glass this time, fully visible now, no cap low, no attempt to disappear. When she began to sing, the action was simple. Breath in, shoulders relaxed, voice forward. The reaction was immediate. Michael's hand lifted slightly, palm open, a reflex he couldn't stop. The exact consequence followed in the room. Engineers froze, no one touched a fader, and the take rolled uninterrupted. Whitney held the final note longer than planned, not louder, longer. The microphone took it cleanly. Michael leaned forward, eyes wide now, and whispered something to the producer beside him. According to accounts, it was just 4 words. That's the one. In an industry built on endless options, that sentence closed doors and opened a future. The moment Michael Jackson heard Whitney Houston sing like that, uncontained, unsoftened, he didn't just recognize talent, he recognized a rival. The aftermath started before the tape finished rewinding. Michael stood, walked into the live room, and spoke directly to Whitney. "You don't chase the song," he said quietly. "You let it come to you." She nodded. No argument, no performance, just understanding. The microphone stood between them like a contract that didn't need signatures. By the next morning, decisions had been made. Whitney's debut strategy shifted. According to industry insiders, songs were reordered, ballads were prioritized. The idea wasn't to introduce her gently, it was to let the voice announce itself. Radio programmers were told to listen carefully, not casually. Michael's reaction had become a reference point, cited in meetings like evidence. He heard something, people said. We don't mess with that. Within weeks, Whitney's sound began to define rooms the way Michael's had. Studio chatter quieted when she stepped to the microphone. Engineers adjusted less. Executives interrupted less. The system had learned again, this time from a voice. Michael watched from a distance as her ascent accelerated, reportedly smiling when early cuts came back unchanged from their raw takes. The microphone remained central, minimal effects, maximum truth. Culturally, the shift was seismic. Whitney's emergence reframed what a black female pop voice could be on mainstream radio, unapologetically powerful, technically pristine, emotionally direct. Michael had recognized it instantly because he had lived the cost of being first in that way. His reaction wasn't mentorship, it was acknowledgement. He didn't shape her, he cleared space. The industry responded like an organism adjusting to new gravity. Marketing leaned into elegance instead of edge. Television appearances emphasized live singing. Each choice traced back to the same anchor detail. Michael Jackson hearing Whitney Houston sing and knowing with rare certainty that the future had just announced itself. Years later, when Whitney's voice would fill arenas and funerals alike, people would revisit that early moment as legend. Some would exaggerate it, some would simplify it, but those who were there remembered the specifics: the microphone height, the held note, Michael's hand lifting without permission. They remembered how fast certainty traveled once it appeared. Michael never publicly took credit. He didn't need to. His legacy was already secure.
But privately, according to those close to him, he spoke of Whitney with a particular respect reserved for equals, not competition, not comparison, recognition. The meaning of the moment is brutal in its simplicity. In a business addicted to control, greatness sometimes announces itself before permission is granted. Michael Jackson heard that announcement in Whitney Houston's voice and understood the risk immediately. If the industry tried to tame it, it would lose it. If it let it stand, it would be changed by it. Whitney stepped to the microphone and didn't ask to be believed. Michael heard her and knew the world was about to have no choice.